It turns out that our next guest you know incredibly well. You've worked with him on behavioral trials, clinical trials, and things like that. And plus, you mentioned his company, Scanadu, in your presentation, is Walter de Brouwer. Please welcome him to the stage.
Great.
Now, Walter de Brouwer is one. Thank you so much. I feel like we're on the Letterman show. Actually, everybody moves down. Now, Walter actually created that tricorder-like device that I told you about, and they announced it at CES. So thank you so much for being here, and we'll talk about that in a moment. But first, I know, Dr. Topol, we didn't bring the Opus One that I know you two share usually when you talk, but we have some great water. I want to talk first about how you both met, because Walter was telling me the interesting story about how you met.
Yeah, well, I think it was in 2011 when I arrived in Silicon Valley, and at that time I was with my investors in Beverly Hills, and I said, I just read this book by this great guy, like the destruction of medicine, and in a creative way, because anyone can destruct. And they said, well, you should just call him. And so I called, and he said, I'm in La Jolla and I have 10 minutes. And so I drove like 3 hours, got up at 6 o'clock in the morning, drove 3 hours. And so he said, okay, you have 10 minutes. And so I said, well...
I didn't do that.
And I said, look, this is going to be a revolution. And this is going to be something big because, M-Health is like the internet is just going to be an appetizer. And I've did my research, and I think there's only one man who can lead this revolution, and that's you. And he was looking at me, and he said, yes. And I said, well, I'm coming to offer my services as a soldier. And that was how our relationship started, actually.
So what did he say? What did Walter say that was so convincing that you said, okay?
Well, he's one of the most creative, entertaining. He's got my number. He makes me laugh so hard. Oftentimes I get sore from listening to him. But he really convinced me in a short time that he was on it, and that he's in this hyper innovative mode. And I'm obviously a great fan of that. So we had a lot of alignment of where the future can go in the health care world.
So fast forward to today, and you have that tricorder-like device that you actually brought with you. And Dr. Topol, you mentioned that you haven't seen the latest iteration. So
No.
I'm wondering if we can actually have a camera up here as well, so we can show all of you on the screen, because it's a small device.
So this is, this is the ER, our view.
Right there in the palm of your hand.
There are no doctors inside. Actually, there are. They are called algorithms now. If you are a doctor and you are an algorithm, your future is bright. So this device, we worked like 3 years just on algorithms and mathematics on it. So blood pressure, we really, I think we rewritten our algorithms 17 times, made them better and better and better. But then we had to fuse them with all the other vital signs. And in the end, we capture an electrical signature of everything in the body. So not only ECG, but all the things around it. ECG is in itself a signature. But what about temperature, which is also a signature? What if you fuse that with respiratory rate, with your ECG, with your heart rate, with your blood pressure? This is probably an enormous electrical Christmas tree where more and more claims will be put on. And for us, so our company has a long-term view, of course with short-term operating realities, so this is what we call dry electronics. And we're also into wet electronics. So wet electronics is disposables, urine analysis, blood analysis, saliva analysis, because in the end, all consumers have to be able to do that in the comfort of their home. You know, they do their own triage, and then they bring their context to a doctor who will be a lot happier not to have to do all that anymore, and he can basically offer his point of view, because that's the new transaction, point of view, context. You get context, you get point of view. Because just imagine that, you know, like I see VC sitting here in the audience, just imagine that you had a company and you get 7 minutes to say if this company is going to make it or not. Can you make that decision? Yeah, of course not. You know, and that's actually what medicine is now about. We are shrinking time and we are wasting time on triage, which the patient themselves can do and want to do. And, you know, that's that new empowerment.
So a lot of thought went into creating this device, but I'm curious, what was that aha moment for you in starting this company and going in this direction?
Yeah, well, so in 2005, our son had a traumatic brain injury.
Actually, you know what? Before you go into that story, I believe your wife might be out here in this audience. Sam, are you out here? Is she? Oh, fantastic. Would you mind coming up on stage, actually? We would love to have you come up and share in this story. If we can have a microphone, is coming in right behind you. And the reason I actually want to bring her up, it's a really important story because so many of us actually go through a lot of things in our lives, and it's those situations that truly can lead to life-saving innovations, such as what you are creating today. Thank you so much. Everybody welcome Sam. Sorry to surprise that on you. But I'm sorry to interrupt, but would you mind continuing with the story? And
sure,
if you want to jump in, please feel free to do so.
So in 2005, our son fell out of a window at 11 meters. So he had a severe traumatic brain injury. He came in at Glasgow 3, which is really, you know, very bad. Yeah, it's a coma scale, by the way, nothing to do with Europe. Well, it has, but so we got into that ER and in intensive care unit, and we didn't understand anything what was going on. And so my wife said to me, because, you know, my background is data science, so like, oh, well, what does it mean? And you know, we had gone into so many difficult things in our lives, and as mathematicians, we think that we control all conceivable worlds. But there, I didn't even know what SpO2 was. I didn't even know what the relationship was with heart rate, with its respiratory. I didn't know what the displacement. So I was in a completely alien environment. You know, like I could have been on Mars, but after a while, we started to go through it. We wrote everything down. We tried to make the baseline calculus, and it took us like a couple of months actually to understand. We were in that hospital for a year, and after 3 months we started to help other parents, and then, you know, we thought like, shit, it's like this is such a bad consumer experience, like because. Yeah.
We kind of became quantified selfers and citizen doctors at the same time, dealing with high emotions in a very difficult situation, and at the same time having a background in tech and science for many years, and having been able to solve all kind of problems for other areas, we thought, wow, at a certain point Walter told me we have to understand those numbers and our environment or our son will not survive. So very quickly we kind of switched. Educated ourselves, very hardly developed very good relationships with all the doctors, and basically all the things that Eric mentioned this morning, you know, all the things you mentioned in your presentations, I could go through all your talk from the patient point of view. Those are all the things we've been going through, only our situation we had after when things got better, we realized that having also been able to connect with other parents, to connect with doctors, and knowing what science and technology could do, we realized that maybe there was more we could do into that equation. And Walter is a big fan of science fiction, and at a certain point, you know, he was logging every single piece of equipment at the ER, intensive care, at the hospital, logging every single piece of data he could have. And then at a certain point, he told me, you know, I think it's time for us to build a medical tricorder. This is really the machine I need right now. And it started as a joke, but at a certain point we realized it was not a joke anymore. This is something we were going to do.
How long after the incident did this realization occur where you're like, we need to do something about this? Because I can imagine that there's this process that you go through of shock and then sorrow, and then at what point does that idea just kind of hit you that we have to take action and help other people?
It took 5 years actually to also, there is the therapy afterwards, and we tried. We had other ideas. What should we do? Should we set up a hospital for kids with brain trauma?
Yeah, we started with the brain because that was our main focus. Like, how can the brain? I mean, what is plasticity? What is neuroplasticity when there are heavy brain injuries and so on? And very quickly we realized that we were. I mean, it's hard to say because it's a process you are in. You don't really realize you're already building something. But all the things we've been doing, like connecting with other parents, doing research for them, the way we shift the conversations we had with the doctors, we were already busy without knowing it. But I think the most striking moment is when you leave the hospital after a year and you still go back regularly. Going to the ER, doing all those measurements that you don't really have to do, you could do them at home. You realize how powerless you are, and you basically have nothing. At a certain point, I told Walter, do you realize that the only tool we have is a thermometer? Mm-hmm. I mean, this is what my parents were using. This is what my grandparents were using. This is just not possible. I need more than a single tool, analog tool, doing temperature, not being intelligent, not connected with anything. And also what you do a lot when you are a patient, you observe. You connect and you observe. And you realize also that your own brain has a very limited processing power. You need more artificial intelligence to process your own knowledge, your own observations, and other people's observations and knowledge, and doctors as well. So,
it started with IDEO here in Palo Alto, where we surveyed what consumers wanted in several states in America, and one of the first things that was immediately apparent was that fever was no longer actually their biggest concern. It was more like cardiovascular. But they wanted something frictionless where they could actually do it several times a day and then monitor also their own baselines, their personalized baselines, but also when they take medicine, what does it do to their heart rate so that they can tell their doctor their context. And that's how we set up, our first big project was the cuffless, blood pressure monitor. And that took us almost 2 years to just get the mathematics right, and that the model worked perfectly within 4 millimeters of mercury. And if the science is there, it's no longer a question of if, it's a question of when. So, but the science must be there first. So it's always hard to do research in a private company. Because some of the things you think you only do development, but in the end you are doing also a part of research. But otherwise you cannot have really a valuable solution, otherwise you're just a broker.
And I would imagine that a lot of the beta testing has been done inside your home.
Oh yeah, so Nelson was a good test case. He's now the most documented child on earth, I think. And all our children should be. Yeah.
And so, Dr. Topel, what is going through your mind as you hear their story and you really understand the impact that you're having and the ultimate impact that every single one of these entrepreneurs could have on the lives of families such as theirs?
First, I mean, they're amazing parents. It's pretty, I think, apparent, not just from their telling the story this morning, but just being familiar with them and what they've done with their son Nelson. I think the thing that Sam touched on about context, about being able to have data, but knowing no doctor can know what's going on in your life at that moment in time when you're getting this data, and it makes it enriched that most people, besides the Browers, may not really know about. I see it on a more routine daily basis with people with their blood pressure, for example, because they know when it spikes really high and it's Monday morning when they go back to work and the rest of the time everything's, I wouldn't know that if they just sent me their blood pressure, for example. Or I prescribe a new medicine and then they say that it's working, but it's not working in the evening, and they can switch it around on their own, but when they take the medicine, that kind of stuff. So that's just a much more mundane example of what it's like when you have context. Walter touched on that. It's not just data, but being able to anchor it, and that's what the future is really about.
And the critical point being that, while you're in the hospital and you're dying, you have all of this information right in front of you. You keep track of everything, but it's really when you're living that you don't have the information, and that's the problem that you're trying to solve.
Yeah, so if you look at, I also, you start to think of life like a battery, In the beginning it goes like, the battery goes very well, it's a bit like your, your MacBook. And, but then, when you get older, the battery, needs more recharging, it leaks a bit. And so, and then if you think like batteries all over the world are monitored all the time, but we're also battery and we're not monitored. So that's, something wrong there.
And in terms of, Sam, what you're seeing, the folks create and what you're seeing your husband actually create, where do you see the white space? What is not being created as of yet that you wish was actually available to you today as you're caring for your son?
Oh, what I'm building. I'm working very hard to get the Scanadu Scout in shape for every household out there. This is the beginning. We're talking about vital signs. We're also working on urine analysis. We have other projects in mind. Clearly, we want to go to give people a full picture of what their health is or might become. So there are so many things out there that Eric mentioned this morning. I think I'm very optimistic. I'm following very closely what's happening, and I know. And on a more positive note, I think that what happened with our son was very tragic, of course. But it might become the motor of something very, very positive for so many people. So, and he's part of that adventure. He comes to the company very often. He's part of the team, so yeah.
I think also our as non-citizens, but we're coming out of heavy regulated industries and also entrepreneurs from banking and telecom. The regulator is everywhere there. So when we started doing medical, and thanks to the advice of Eric and also Alan Green, so I started to see that as a consumer going to a hospital, there is a data challenge, because I can have data on myself, but the doctor will not accept it, so they'll do it all over again. So I started to see that the regulator, so the FDA, is actually the API between the consumer and the doctor, because if we have FDA-cleared devices as consumers and we go to hospital, they are immediately accepted, you shrink time, and basically you are there for therapeutics and not diagnostics anymore. And I think that was what set us apart in 2011 when we started in Silicon Valley. I think we were, considered rebels because we wanted to comply with the law.
And one final surprising statistic, 70% of Americans actually don't want to know about their health. So how can you use your journey and your experience to actually convince them?
Yeah, I think that's the most interesting part, because people want to know about their health, or people want to know more about their activity levels. There's enough companies already in there, but the 70% is now changing. The 70% is like moving because this Obamacare, and so there is the whisper, like we're all going to be included, and what does that mean? And we're all going to be able to talk about medicine, and the rules are going to change. So this 70% is in motion and is highly, vocal. And I think that's why on our devices it says at the back, sapere aude, like dare to know. So it was the battle cry of the Enlightenment one day. So, and I think this new, mobile health spring or revolution, there will also be that battle cry. It's the 70% that is the most, the most thankful consumer group, I think, that we will go into. Because once you start, it becomes actually quite addictive. Like, you feed, it's like the iPhone. When we got it first, we fed like information into it, and it got us addicted into more information until it became very rich. The same is going to happen now with mobile health. We'll feed information into it, and we'll share it, we'll connect with others, we'll think of graph theory, like where we are in that network, where are the other patients who can advise us, and I think it's going to be, it's going to be a far better consumer experience for healthcare. And I think in 3 to 5 years, we might see a time that healthcare is a highly profitable sector. And we wouldn't understand anymore how it was not profitable.
Yeah, and also to come back, just to give you an anecdote, I received many emails from schools in the US, from teachers, who are asking us if they could use the device for the kids to better understand how their body function and everything. And I think, healthcare is something we only think about when we are sick or when something happens, simply because we don't have the tools to interest us. There is something deeply fascinating about our bodies, about our health, about how it all functions, but we just don't know, and we don't have the accessible tool to learn about it. And I'm sure, like our kids, they all play with tablets, with phones. It's not like they don't love technology as such. It is what all those tools are giving them, what they can do with that. So it's also our job to create great user experiences so that people feel very attracted, interested, and yeah.
Thank you so much, Sam and Walter and Dr. Eric Topol. Let's have a big round of applause. Thank you so much for sharing your story.